What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown here in the Eagle newsroom, and I'm alongside the man, the myth, the legend, Jay Arnold. Jay, how's it going, buddy?
It is a Monday. It is certainly a Monday. It's nice and dreary and gray, and I think it's a perfect metaphor for how the Texas A&M football season has gone this far.
Here you go. Of course, former Texas A&M defensive tackle that Jay Arnold is. Jay, let's just start generic. What did you see from that game in Auburn? And really, since we had some technical difficulties and some election coverage last week that kept us from doing one of these, we can even go back and look a little bit at Florida too. Those two games. What did you see out of the Aggies? Concerning and constructive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concerning things. You know, not able to get much going with the offense after I thought they had taken steps forward against Ole Miss and even against Florida to some degree. The offense really struggled against Auburn. And then defensively, it's the same issue that they were running into for the last several games. And what continues to haunt this defense is the rushing defense. Auburn's able to go for 270 yards on 55 carries, averaging just a shade under 5 yards carry. And it's hard to win games when you're giving up that many yards rushing. And they were able to keep Auburn to out of the end zone for the most part. Obviously, the Tigers were able to get one touchdown in this contest, but it's just there's not a lot to take away from positively in that contest. Even special teams, we had another delay of game on the punting unit, so there's a lot to build towards, but not necessarily a lot to build on.
So, this is something that me and the great Robert Cessna debated over, because you look at that Auburn game in the first half, they're getting run all over to the tune of they knew that Auburn was going to run against them, and they only attempted 3 passes. I mean, it looked like a high school offense out there with a 3A high school offense or at times. But in the second half, they came out, they forced some turnovers, they kept them in the game. Is that, Cease graded them at a B, I believe, in that game because of what they were able to do in the second half. But I say if they do anything in the first half to stop that rushing attack, which they knew was coming, they don't put themselves in that situation to need that kind of defensive effort. How do you kind of grade where A&M was defensively the last 2 weeks? Because it was a little Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, like you said, the second half was much better than the first half. But if you're giving up 270 yards on the ground in a contest, I can't give you a B. I think it's a C performance at best. The turnovers were something that helped quite a bit. Obviously, you had a few fumbles there that kept A&M in the contest, and there was an interception at the end of the half. But that didn't really do anything. It was kind of a deal where A&M wasn't able to do anything on the possession. The clock ran out. But you look at the fumbles, and there was one that I think maybe would have been a little bit more of a boost had it stood or had it counted. The one with Shamar Stewart, where I think an Auburn player touched it while out of bounds, which classified it as a dead ball. But I guess you could say that the turnovers were positive. You win the turnover battle, but again, 270 yards rushing, almost 5 yards carry. So you look at it, and it's 2 plays and a first down. It is what you're basically averaging there. And then, I talked about it a little bit before we went on the air, but there's also some issues in coverage with the wheel routes. The touchdown in the first quarter, Javarius Johnson's left all alone, scores relatively easy, kind of leaking out of the backfield in like a sniffer back or a H-back type position behind the offensive line, runs a wheel route and is pretty much uncovered. And then later in the game, Jarquez Hunter was wide open, and Robbie Ashford missed him, and it was going to be another touchdown. So, there's quite a few issues.
And I need to go back and look at the film on that to see if this was the case. But something that I noticed that they might have been doing earlier in the season, but it seemed like a new wrinkle to me, was going with the three-man, technically a three-down lineman front, but they had LT Overton, excuse me, stood up and actually in coverage off the line. I mean, I think that's something you probably do when you know that they're going to be running the ball. I don't know if he was in there and that might have been his man, but what did seem like a little bit of a different look. And maybe what is the rationale behind giving them a look like that?
Yeah, I mean, it can confuse a quarterback for sure when they're not expecting somebody to drop into coverage necessarily. But you definitely don't want somebody like LT Overton covering a guy with as much speed as Javarius Johnson has. And then, I mean, also you're putting a true freshman in a pretty difficult situation too. If you're asking him to play both the run and be ready to help out in pass coverage. So I don't know if that was just something that DJ Durkin saw on film that he thought maybe would prevent or would cause issues for Robbie Ashford back there taking snaps. But it's not necessarily a sustainable piece of strategy to have a defensive lineman out there in coverage. Obviously, you know, you'll drop into coverage on blitzes on occasion. I mean, for me personally, I know when we were blitzing a lot at the end of the game against Duke in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, I mean, there was a few times where I dropped into coverage myself. But it's more you if you're going to drop a defensive lineman into coverage, you really want them to be more of a in the middle of the defense. You don't want them on the edges, and you definitely don't want them kind of running with receivers. You want them to be more of a spot or a zone guy.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say tomorrow, I know you've been kind of pushing for this a little bit. Let's say Jay Arnold is hired as defensive coordinator for the what do you change? What needs to change? What can you change not in the next two games, but then also in the offseason moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I do want to talk about is this defensive line is extremely young. I think a lot of people were a little bit overconfident based on the talent coming in, but I was I wanted to temper my expectations a little bit just because of the amount of new blood on the defensive line. You lose. I mean, we talked about it. The guys that A&M lost along the defensive line, DeMarvin Leal and Jaden Peavy. I mean, they lost so many pieces last year. So it's reasonable that they took a step back. I just think people were a little bit unreasonable with their expectations. So, I mean, giving those guys a chance to get a full offseason in the weight room, I think is going to be a major key. You know, it's going to be a lot of study. I don't know exactly what to change just because there's been so many things that are going wrong. I think you have to spend a little more time in the film to get those running fits right. I think that's something that the A&M has struggled with. And then you look at the linebacking core as well. It's just it seems disjointed. I think maybe it's something where the run defense needs a more uniform approach or a more inline approach where the linebackers and defensive line are really more on the same page. And then I think a lot of the offseason, you're going to have to work on shedding blocks because even if you are fit correctly, you still have to shed blocks and make plays. And that's something that I think A&M has struggled with at times. Getting, you know, A&M fans want to say it's holding, but it's not. You have to be able to get off blocks and make a play, or at least get off the block to the point where it is holding. Basically, make the ref make that call.
Well, and yeah, you see in that, especially in that Auburn game, when they got around the outside on some stretch runs or some pitch plays, it's a lot of times the cornerbacks and the defensive backs that had the most trouble shedding those blocks, and what should have been a play stop behind the line turned into some more yards. let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball. And I know if you were listening to the broadcast, Jordan Rogers was leaning pretty hard into Jimbo Fisher, the play calling in the route structures of the wide receivers, because they were, for as much as Connor Wegman struggled, there weren't a lot of options of guys open for a whole lot of the game. A lot of just seemed like four verticals type stuff. Do you agree with some of Rogers' assessment? What were you kind of seeing on the offensive side of the ball? Was it as vanilla as it seemed to be?
Yeah, it was vanilla. And then also, I mean, we saw at the end of the game, I mean, when it was 2-minute drill, it seemed like Wegman was able to kind of get a little bit looser, relaxed, and able to make some of those throws. So I do agree with what Jordan Rogers was saying about a vanilla play calling. I mean, four verts is not something that you want to run often. It's like
You're playing NCAA 14.
yeah,
I,
you're making.
I was all about that.
I mean, four verts is what I'm running 3 snaps, like a series in Madden, but I'm not an offensive play caller, right? So, it's, and then you look at it. I mean, obviously, this receiving course hurt by the loss of Anai Smith early in the season, and then Moose Muhammad is kind of slotted into that role. I think also out this game. You have no Devon A-Chain. So there's quite a few issues, and then I actually think the offensive line took a step back, which hurt Wegman a little bit too. But I mean, Wegman wasn't great either. So you look at everything, and I mean, it was just kind of a perfect storm of bad football.
Sure. Well, we mentioned Musa Mohammed there. Of course, he was benched. Jimbo Fisher declined to talk about why he was benched. Musa Mohammed sent out a tweet saying it was due to arm sleeves. And as the reporting and the rumors have gone, it's about maybe him declining to take off arm sleeves when coaches said. We're not going to get too heavy into that because Jimbo didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about the rule. I think it's kind of been beat ad nauseum. Jimbo Fisher said Moose Muhammad to be available for the game this weekend. But from your experience, were there equipment types of rules like that when you played that you had to adhere to? Were they unpopular with players? How do you navigate that coach player equipment dynamic from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is a weird one for me. I mean, you can see the background there on I think the picture's up behind you, Travis. I wasn't much of an equipment guy. I was so that's a defensive play call wristband too.
Oh, there you go.
And then I taped my wrists. But I will say the one thing that we did do was you did have to have your ankles taped during games and during practice to prevent injury. And if you did not have your ankles taped, you would run. Oh, you could also wear braces. I was more of a tape guy. I didn't enjoy the lacing part. Some people would like to say that I didn't know how to tie the ankle braces correctly, but I was more of a tape guy. I don't know. I like you said, it's been beaten to death ad nauseum. This is a weird deal for me. I don't really know how to comment on it. I think it's just a symptom of structural issues that have just kind of plagued A&M all season. It just seems like one more thing on the pile.
Sure. So A&M with this loss is not going to be able to be bowl eligible. You got to go to bowl games every year that you played. So you can't necessarily speak to missing out on bowl season, but on the converse of that, what does bowl season mean to players? I mean, is that something that you're thinking about from the moment the season kicks off of that bowl vacation? Explain to me what bowl games mean to players.
Yeah, I mean, I love bowl games. Bowl week was some of the most fun that we had. Obviously, it's changed a little bit with guys who are sitting out to prepare for the draft, but I don't think bowl week is necessarily for those guys anyway. That know they have kind of a football career beyond the bowl games. For I hate it for these seniors. And not that A&M has a ton of seniors on the team, but guys that wanted one last chance to play with a squad, and then the bowl game itself is it's a fun experience. We also can't forget that this team missed the bowl game last year because of the illness. I think it was scheduled to play Wake Forest.
Yeah,
Uh,
caution.
that was I mean, so that's two bowl games in a row that you're not getting that experience. It's the only time as an athlete in college that you're really getting to experience the town that you're traveling to. Uh, otherwise you're kind of just getting there the day before the game and going through walkthroughs and stuff. You're at the hotel, whatever other events they have. I know, like, we would go watch a movie uh, at home or away, but you're not really experiencing the city that you're in. Bowl game was a super fun, super unique experience that, I mean, I'll still talk about the Chick-fil-A Bowl like that. I mean, it's a special place for me in my heart for a multitude of reasons. I mean, it was my first start. It was, I mean, we had so much fun there in Atlanta, and obviously the game itself was incredible. Uh, so those are all things that these guys aren't going to get to experience because they're the record wasn't good enough to qualify for a bowl. Uh, so I mean, I hate it for the guys just because that's, for me, part of the quintessential college football player experience, and they're not getting that this year. And obviously, the young guys have a chance to right that wrong next year. But for some guys, this is their last season, and they're not going to get that opportunity now.
And you want to talk about that young guys from a coaching standpoint. How important were those bowl practices? Because I know coaches I've talked to have said that sometimes those bowl practices are more important than fall camp and spring practice.
Yeah, so the bowl practices, especially for young guys, right? It's a lot like fall camp, except now those young guys know what a practice is supposed to look like. It's not where they're kind of, coming into a practice kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not really sure what's going on yet. Now they know what a practice looks like. So they're not just learning how to practice like they are in fall camp. Now they're learning, they know how to practice, and now they get a chance to kind of really get that learning process down as far as focusing on the football aspect and not just trying to figure out where their place is, where they're supposed to go, and running around with their head kind of spinning, adjusting to the pace of a college practice.
Sure. So UMass this weekend, it's that lovely SEC end of the season reprieve. From a coverage standpoint, from I think a fans standpoint, you can speak to that better than me. It just seems like such a dud. I mean, I think this season is it might be a little bit of a welcome occasion to where you have a chance to pick up a win and break the losing streak. But when you're in the middle of a season that you are winning some games, for a player, is it a little bit of a, okay, come on, or I mean, is it just another opportunity to get to play, so you're going to get to play?
It can be a little bit of both. I mean, with an opponent like UMass or an FCS opponent, which tends to be the teams that end up getting this late November game, it's also a chance for guys to get healthy too. If they got like a nagging injury, you put the game away early, give those guys a chance to rest, get some of the young guys some action. I don't think Texas A&M has that luxury just because they're already so thin, for one, and then also because they're already playing young guys. I mean, so A&M needs to go out there and execute. I don't want to take anything for granted this season just because of the way things have gone. But this is an opportunity for growth. And I think that's important for a team like A&M. Obviously, if your team's having a little bit more success, like I talked about, I touched on the things like getting guys rested, having a chance to get some of the young guys action. And then I don't love it from a fan perspective as far as watching, it's late season football. I want to be watching games that matter, but I get why the SEC has kind of done this, and it's become the setup for the final week of the season.
It'll be interesting to see if it survives the cut when Oklahoma and Texas enter the conference, whenever that's going to happen. And there's the potential to that 9-game conference schedule. You think that would be the game that gets the axe. So let's close it out. I have two very important questions to close out with. One is going to be the last one, and that's going to be, of course, your meal for the week to get ready for UMass. But I've had a real ongoing debate on Twitter today. And if you go back to the press conference today, you had one wide receiver, Jalen Preston, say that their goal for the season is to, quote, dominate UMass and, quote, piss in their cornflakes when talking about LSU and the season that they're having. I want to go back to the second part of that and ask, does anybody actually eat cornflakes or underrated cereal? I want to know your take on cornflakes.
So I'm not a cereal guy in general. I don't know that I've even ever had cornflakes, if I'm being honest.
I just
I was always like a Lucky Charms, Cocoa Puffs. Trying to think what else. I mean, I would even have Raisin Bran.
See, I'm gonna go bland cereal. I'm gonna go Raisin Bran, or I'm gonna go Honey Nut Cheerios before I even think about going for cornflakes.
Yeah, Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I ever had cornflakes. And I think also you kind of grow out of those sugary cereals as you kind of progress. I mean, Raisin Bran was a good one for me.
It's not true. You can stay with the sugar cereals as long as you.
Well, I'm not telling people what they should or shouldn't eat. I just maybe slow down my sugar intake a little bit.
I need to. Okay, so let's finish it out. What's your big UMass meal of the week?
Well, it's a New England team, UMass. I think you get like a bowl of like clam chowder, especially if the temperature stays cold, right? Go get you a nice soup, a nice broth. I mean, I think they gave
broth from the sidelines of the LSU game.
Yeah, and I think they asked Brian Kelly about that, and he said he preferred clam chowder too. So UMass clam chowder, I think that's what you go with.
Awesome, Jay. As always, thank you. Enlightening times with you. Enjoy that UMass game and your cup of chicken broth this weekend, and we'll be back next week to look at LSU and as the season wraps up.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody.